This is the Capitol Rundown.
She used in the same interview on the same subject these kinds of words: troubling, worried, concerned, and I'm outraged.
We've taken God out of the classroom, we've taken God out of the courtroom, and we've taken God out of the culture.
You had 20 state legislators getting behind you. All of these same people got behind Tom Leonard, and he lost big time.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Thompson. It was another big week in politics here in Michigan. 4 of the Republicans who want to unseat Governor Gretchen Whitmer went head to head. We begin our show today with the highlights and the breakdown. Here to kick off our coverage is Capitol Rundown correspondent Josh Sanchez.
I would like to reduce the income tax and over time see that income tax reduced and eliminated over time. But like as you're mentioning, it's not possible to immediately get rid of that income tax because you have to replace that with something else.
Tackling inflation brought the candidates together, with Tudor Dixon and Kevin Rinke both supporting reducing or removing the personal income tax, while Garrett Soldano and Ryan Kelly both talked about a gas tax holiday to help drivers at the pump. When it came to voter submitted questions, all candidates said they opposed the temporary injunction on the 1931 state ban on abortion, with Rinke saying this debate is now up to the people here in Michigan to decide.
This is a legislative issue, and the legislature needs to represent the people of this state to determine what our path forward is.
Voters also asked about the candidates' positions on the 2020 election. All said there were signs of irregularities, with both Kelly and Soldano furthering theories of fraud. And Kelly's response to the January 6th attack on the Capitol comes a day before he is due in court over misdemeanor charges from the riot.
And you know, that was a First Amendment activity by a majority of those people, myself included. We were there protesting the government because we don't like the results of the 2020 election, the process of how it happened.
And on infrastructure and energy policy, all candidates agreed with expanding nuclear energy in the state, as well as tapping into fossil fuels. Soldano called for fewer regulations on energy companies here in Michigan.
So we are primed and ready, and the best thing that we must do, or the most important thing, is to make sure that government's boot is off our neck and make sure that no governor can do this again.
Here for you in Lansing, Josh Sanchez, 6 News.
Well, so you heard from the candidates. Now let's dig deeper with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic. He's covered our state governors for decades and moderated countless debates. Here's his take on what happened Wednesday night.
As you cover and analyze these debates, you approach them from 2 levels: what they said content-wise and then the political implications, and that's where the news was made. 2 of the underdog candidates, Mr. Soldano and Mr. Kelly, took on the perceived frontrunner, Tudor Dixon, for allegedly being the, quote, establishment candidate. Now, in the Trump world, that is code for if she's the establishment candidate, she's not with us like the Trump people that we are. So they basically were trying to bring her down, and here's the exchange between all 3.
You're backed by the DeVos empire, and I think as Michiganders, we're sick and tired of the career politicians in these establishments having control over all of us and having somebody's administration bought and paid for, which yours is, Mrs. Dixon.
You have the establishment lining up behind you, that's for sure. Your email today that you had 20 state legislators getting behind you. All of these same people got behind Tom Leonard, and he lost big time to Matt DePerno, and that's what's going to happen again this time.
When I walked out of a meeting with the DeVosses and other business leaders, Garrett was ushered in after me, so I would guess he would have to explain why he would sit down with them if he thought so poorly of them.
As Tudor Dixon's supporters were watching her perform on the stage, they're probably thinking to themselves, we need to go back and clean that up just a little bit, because she did not make a good defense of what they were saying about her on offense. As for Kevin Rinke, he did not participate in taking her on. He was sort of an innocent bystander.
Thank you, Tim. We'll have more from Tim on the rest of the week in Michigan politics later in our show. Coming up next, we'll introduce you to the candidate who didn't make the stage at the debate. We'll hear from Ralph Rebant and what he has to say when the Capitol Rundown continues. 5 Republican candidates will be on the primary ballot for governor in a few weeks, but only 4 of them were at a televised debate Wednesday. That's because Ralph Rebant didn't poll high enough to qualify to make the stage. Despite that, he's still confident he has a shot at winning the race, and the former pastor recently told me once he does, bringing God back into our culture is the top of his list. Take a listen.
I tell people that I'm about truth, transparency, and accountability. And I tell people I'm going to stand before God one day and give an account for whatever I do and whatever I say, so why shouldn't Michigan and the citizens know what I do, what's going on in my office? I'm happy to be very transparent.
How do you see the whole abortion issue playing out here in Michigan?
I'm pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception, and science supports that. That baby, I'll just say, is not the woman's body. Science proves that. I'd be happy to chat with anybody about that, but you know, it's very true that the DNA of that baby that's been aborted is different than the mother's.
Do you think society, as it is currently, is open to bringing the church and state back together?
That's a good question. When we talk about bringing it back together, I would say that we do have a First Amendment, so there is a distinction. I completely get that, and it's my faith that gives me the right to say to someone, as a citizen of Michigan, you don't have to follow any religion. If you want to follow a religion that's not mine, that's okay too. I mean, we understand that as those who embrace the First Amendment. And so to answer that question, though, I see Michigan all over the state ripe for bringing back our Judeo-Christian principles. And so when it comes to the shooting issue, I'm telling people the reason why we keep passing more laws is because we don't understand what the real problem. The problem is a heart issue. It's a spiritual issue. And as I've been a pastor for 35 years, I've seen God change people's anger and lack of direction and depression and give them meaningful lives. We've taken God out of the classroom, we've taken God out of the courtroom, and we've taken God out of culture. Ethan Crumbley, before he went on the shooting spree, wrote a note, and his note was, "My life is meaningless." So I asked the chiefs, what else would we expect when we tell people they're the product of meaningless molecules bumping together billions of years ago?
So do you feel like this is something you're being called to at the moment?
I do. I would not have stepped away from 35 years at our church. Having planted it and then doing what I'm doing, I would not have stepped away from it unless I thought it was a calling.
Well, up next, we'll continue our conversation with the Dean of the Capitol Press Corps. So stay tuned for Tim's take on This Week in Michigan Politics. The Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. Well, there was a lot more going on this week in Michigan politics than the Republican gubernatorial debate. Here now to break it all down for us are Kiera Lake and Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic.
Tim, thank you so much for joining us as always. But the topic we want to start off by talking about is that Roe versus Wade controversy. We're even seeing it with our governor. She actually mentioned about Supreme Court justices. What did she have to say about them specifically?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Lake, for the question, because it's a good one. We had a sit down with the governor earlier in the week, and I've been covering this Gretchen Whitmer for 15 years, first in the House, the Senate, now as governor. And I've never done an interview with her where she used in the same interview on the same subject these kinds of words: troubling, worried, concerned, and I'm outraged. What is she outraged about? The U.S. Supreme Court. She said, as an attorney, she used to have confidence in the high court in the decisions that they were making were apolitical. Now she says that confidence has been, quote, shaken. And in light of that, she is not endorsing a change, but she is certainly willing to talk about changing the life-term appointments that these justices have. But now, in the wake of these decisions, the governor says not only abortion, but decisions on climate change and on guns, she's beginning to think that maybe we ought to look at term limits, a limited number of years on the high court. Clearly, she is thinking about it, and interestingly, she and her daughters have talked about this. And this is where the governor says she is outraged, because the generations that are coming up after her, she believes, will feel the impact of these climate control decisions, these gun decisions, and clearly abortion.
Kind of switching gears now, let's talk about the petition drives, those two big important ones where signatures are due on Monday. What do you have to say about those?
This is very important because it involves every voter that's going to be voting in the November election if these petition drives are successful. Let's just basically unpack what they are. One, is to legalize abortion in Michigan in direct response to what the Supreme Court did on this issue, giving it to the states, not banning abortions per se, but giving the states the right to either do that or embrace them. Secondly, more elections reforms, another petition drive. This one would allow voting over 7 days. It would also allow local clerks to start counting absentee ballots, not 10 hours before the polls close, but 7 days. And just back on the abortion one, we are told by inside sources that the abortion people need about 400,000 plus signatures in order to get on the ballot. They supposedly are going to turn in, check this number, 800,000. If that is true, and we have not had that number confirmed, that would be a record. That would be historic. And it would certainly underscore the emotion and the angst, if you will, among some voters who wanted to sign this petition to do something to preserve abortion in this state. 800,000 is an amazing number.
Well, thank you both. Polls and predictions, there are a lot of those ahead of this big midterm election. So who will win the House, the Senate, and the governor's race in November? Hear what some election experts think will happen when the Capitol Rundown continues. Michigan native Nate Silver became famous for his use of statistics and predictions. He founded a website called 538, which gives the odds on everything from politics to sports. The group recently put together its predictions for various races across the country. Our Kira Lake sat down with 538's Nate Rakich to find out what the numbers say for Michigan.
Well, thanks for joining us. Well, the folks at 538 just put together some projections for the House, the Senate, and the governor's races in the 2022 election. Nate, can you give us a quick overview of your results?
Sure. So in the House, we give Republicans an 87 in 100 chance of taking control. So they are pretty strong favorites there. However, the Senate is looking like much more of a toss-up. Right now, we only think that Republicans would win 54 out of 100 times, which of course means that Democrats would win 46 out of 100 times. So essentially, that's pretty close to a 50-50 coin flip.
Now, we want to talk a little more specifically about Michigan. So Governor Gretchen Whitmer is up for re-election, and although we're a month away from knowing who she's going to run against, how do you like her odds?
We think she's in pretty good shape. Right now, she has a 91 in 100 chance of winning re-election. So, you know, as you folks know, her Republican opponents have had a difficult time, you know, getting on the ballot and such, and it's not clear who Republicans will nominate and whether they will really be able to pack any punch against her.
Now, finally, the race for the Michigan 7th Congressional District is one of the few real toss-ups across the nation. So incumbent Elissa Slotkin is likely to run against State Senator Tom Barrett. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, this is another race that basically you can flip a coin. So right now we have Congresswoman Slotkin as a 52 in 100 chance to win re-election, and Republicans are at 48 in 100 to win. So those are obviously very close. So this is definitely going to be a race that can go either way.
So how do you think, or who will win the 7th race? How do you think that will affect the House?
Well, I think that it'll be one of, you know, many close races this year, but I think just given how small of a majority Democrats have in the House currently, there are a lot of seats that Republicans are even more favored to win than in Michigan's 7th. So I think that by the time it kind of, you know, comes down to that race and that race gets decided, I think that, frankly, Republicans will have taken control of the House based on districts elsewhere.
All right, Nate from 538, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, what happens when you take the numbers out of the game and just look at the issues? Up next, we catch up with a political science expert from MSU who gives us his take on what will affect the vote the most this fall. Stay with us. From record inflation to high gas prices to abortion and the congressional hearings on the Capitol unrest on January 6th, there's no shortage of contentious issues in the run-up to the midterm elections this fall. So what matters most to voters? Well, I recently caught up with the interim chair of the Department of Political Science at MSU. Here's his take ahead of November.
There's no way to distract people from the economy. There's just no way of doing that. Gas prices as a whole is not the only thing, but the meat in the grocery store and that sort of thing, those are where you're going to really see that sort of cut and dry impact. With the economy being the way it is, we would expect the Republicans to benefit. Now, redistricting might make things a little noisier than what our expectations are, but still on the whole, we'd expect this to be more beneficial for Republicans here. At the same time, we have headlines about these hearings. We're having headlines still about constant inflation, traveling problems, and whatnot. And so is this in terms of encouraging their own supporters or trying to win what we might call swing voters or those voters in the middle? Or more importantly, I guess the idea would be there might be some disaffected Democrats who turned out in 2020 who may now be impacted by the economy, and they're trying to keep them motivated to turn out in 2022. And whether these testimonies actually do anything, I'd say again, a lot of people, for instance, white evangelicals said they were voting for Trump because he was a vessel. He was imperfect, but he could do good things even though he was imperfect. And look what if they were voting for pro-life reasons and they now have Roe v. Wade sort of effectively overturned, that just goes to show that reasoning worked.
Would you say that even with like the abortion issue and the stuff in the Supreme Court, when it comes to still social issues like that, that's still just not going to compete with inflation when it comes to voters?
Abortion as an issue only is a small percentage of people who consider it very important. It's both on the pro-choice and the pro-life side. And so it is more of it's a strong mobilizer for certain types of people to give money or to participate and volunteer. And those things, though, only matter at the margins.
Well, if you're interested in getting more Michigan political news right in your inbox, we have Just the Thing. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at that symbol on your screen right now. It will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletters. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We hope to see you again next weekend.